Well, hi, Laura. It's so great to see you. I'm so excited that we are finally connecting and I get to see your face and hear you and chat with you about some really important things today. I just want to let my audience know that I've been following you for quite some time on social media. I get your newsletters. I get an email, I'm pretty sure, pretty much every day. And I see you on other, have quite a presence on social media. And I think it's really important for people to know who have not been diagnosed with breast cancer and who have been diagnosed that there's so much support out there. And I found that out in June of 2022 that this is the sisterhood of all sisterhood. So welcome, sister. How's it
Thank you
going?
so much. Thank you so much, Jamie. It's a pleasure to be a guest on your podcast. As someone who runs our own podcast, Breast Cancer Conversations, I feel like the tables have turned. I'm rarely a guest on someone else's show. So I'm really excited to be here, share my story, and provide hope and inspiration to your listeners and community.
Yeah, the more that we have, I try to be on as many podcasts as I possibly can because, it just opens up a whole new audience that for people to hear everybody else's stories and they're all so unique. And I swear every time I finish an interview, I shut that computer and go, yeah, what a great story that people
hmm
just need to know. So I appreciate your having a podcast too. I first want to kind of dive into your personal story with breast cancer, your diagnosis and your treatment, and so that our audience can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I just want to say thank you for being part of our survivingbreastcancer.org community and following us and connecting as well. That means a lot, especially in the world of podcasting when it's audio and anyone around the world can just download. We don't always get the beautiful experiences of meeting who our listeners are or who's reading our newsletters or our blogs. They're just IP addresses. So again, I really appreciate that,
Well,
Jamie.
yeah, and I think my story's on your website.
Yes.
So yeah, that's really cool too.
Yeah. Awesome. Amazing. So I was diagnosed, gosh, I feel like it feels like yesterday in some regards, but it was actually kind of a while ago. I was diagnosed in the fall of 2016. So way before COVID, even. I feel like COVID is like the milestone that everyone like benchmarks things against now. So I was diagnosed in 2016 um, at the age of 34. And so I never had a mammogram before. I was a strict vegan at the time, very athletic, healthy, bought a condo, thriving in my career, stories that I'm sure a lot of us have heard where it's like living the life, things were great. And I I don't know if I was misdiagnosed earlier or just not taken seriously when I was talking to my primary care about a lump that I felt actually under my armpit. So it wasn't even on my breast. I had this little like nodular thing like under my armpit that for all intents and purposes was an ingrown hair or just like a lump or something not to be concerning. And even, when I was talking to my boyfriend at the time about it, I was like, oh, I'm not worried about it. It just always has been there. So, yes, we want to know our bodies, but then at the same time, we also know our bodies that like, oh, is that normal? Is that supposed to be normal? Is that something that has always been there that doesn't cause alarm? And so I caution all of us, like when we get to know our bodies, to understand what the normal is and then to really be able to raise the alarms when something doesn't seem normal and not just to take like don't worry as like the passive answer. So fast forward, I think I was like 32 at the time. Fast forward to 2016 at the age of 34, that lump actually was still under my armpit, but then I started noticing dimpling in my breast. And again, I was mentioning that I was pretty athletic and working out, and I was a vegan. And at the time, I'm like, pumping iron in the gym, and I'm like looking in the mirror, and I'm like feeling really strong and buff and all these great things. And, I'm excited that my pectoral muscles are like developing, but my left chest was not. It actually seemed like smaller. And like I'm definitely lifting the same amount of weights on both arms. Like I'm definitely doing the same things. Like I don't know why. It just caught me in the mirror that like I looked a little like my chest didn't look the same from the right to the left. And when I was examining my breast a little bit more, I did notice that there was like dimpling. And I didn't know that dimpling was a sign of breast cancer per se. I just knew at that point my breast shouldn't be dimpling because it didn't look like my right breast. And so then, of course, I go to Dr. Google and I start looking at, what does it mean when your breast starts dimpling? And then all of the information around breast cancer kind of proliferates. And so I went to my primary again to say, I'm concerned. I am noticing the dimpling. She still was not concerned at that time, which I found also, again, at this point, a little bit more alarming because I'm like, well, this just doesn't seem normal. Can we at least get a mammogram to rule out breast cancer so I can at least sleep at night? I don't want the anxiety. So she luckily scheduled a diagnostic mammogram for the following week. And I went in for my very first mammogram, which was a diagnostic mammogram. And I thought it was going to be one of those things where like I tell my employer, like, hey, I'm coming in at like 10 o'clock. I have like a medical appointment this morning. I'll be in at 10. Everything's fine. Like, we'll catch up soon. Well, after the mammogram, they actually asked if I could stay and squeeze me in for a ultrasound during lunch. And immediately after that, they wanted to do a biopsy all in the same day. So I called my boyfriend and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I need you here at the hospital. I'm really nervous. Like, this was supposed to just be what I thought, like a mammogram to rule out that it wasn't breast cancer. That immediately got escalated into, a mammogram to a ultrasound. And now they wanted to do, like, right then and there, a biopsy. And I remember the doctor coming in and I had to sign this waiver. She was like, explain to me what the biopsy was. And like, I've never even broken a bone in my life, like, let alone having to deal with cancer. Like, I didn't know what a biopsy was. I didn't know how much it was going to hurt. And when she gave me the paper to sign, she was telling me that some of the risks of getting the biopsy is that I could have a collapsed lung because of where they were going into my breast. And so I just had to sign off to say, I understand the risk. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I want a collapsed lung. Like, I didn't come here for this. Like, I was really concerned. And I think, like, I didn't know. I felt like I was just like signing my life away. I'm like, well, if I don't sign this, then you're not doing the biopsy and we will not know if I have cancer or not. Or I sign this and then something can go wrong and then I'm going to have like a problem with my lungs. It's like, which two evils do I choose?
Yeah.
But obviously you just like any medical thing, you sign your life away, you sign the forms. They did the biopsy. And needless to say, I called my employer and was like, I'm just taking the full day off today. I am not coming in this afternoon. And I just need some time to regroup. I think that was really traumatic. Just the diagnostic component in and of itself. Not knowing anything about not having a mammogram before in my life, not understanding the difference between a diagnostic mammogram and a regular mammogram. Not understanding, like, I haven't had kids. I've never had to have an ultrasound for other things before either. So I'm like, what is all of this? What are you looking for? And you're trying so hard to like read their faces when they're looking at the screen. Like, just give me some clue. But they must be all great poker players because they do this for a living. And, they're like, just wait here. We're going to bring in the doctor type of tone. I'm lucky that I live in Boston, and so I feel very fortunate that I have access to like some of the best hospitals and medical centers in the world. So despite the circumstances, I felt like I was in really good hands. And then I think like 2 weeks later, after I got the results of my biopsy, I was back-to-back appointments meeting with oncologists and doing all sorts of further diagnostics to inquire, since the cancer had spread to my lymph node. So we did the biopsy on not just my breast tissue, but also on my lymph node. And because it had spread to the lymph nodes, we ended up doing a full bone scan as well to see if there was an extent of metastasis. We also did an MRI guided biopsy, which was also not very fun, but we wanted to make sure that there was nothing also on the right breast and all sorts of things. So just to really get a sense of the landscape of cancer to inform what my treatment plan was going to be. So that was quite intense.
Yeah, that sounds awfully scary. And not to mention, you probably weren't even thinking at the age that you were that you had anything to worry about. You were healthy. You said you were healthy. And it's interesting because when I was diagnosed, the first thing that people said to me was, "Oh my God, Jamie, but you were so healthy."
Mm-hmm.
And it really confused me because I thought to myself, I am I am healthy. Like I'm really healthy. I was at the
Yeah.
healthiest of my life at that point. And it occurred to me later on that I learned that healthy people can get cancer.
Yes. Yes.
And
Vegans can get cancer.
vegans
Like,
can get cancer. Yeah. Yeah. So
mhm.
that's interesting that you were a vegan, you were an athlete, you really took care of your body. You were 34 years old and you have had no kids, or you had no kids at the
Right.
time. Not sure but that just sounds really scary. And I will tell you that those poker faces, I've learned how to read through them.
Oh, what's the secret?
Um, when I'm laying there and I'm getting an ultrasound, I do look at the screen and I look at the
Mhm.
text face, and I usually can tell when they see
Mm.
something for some reason. And it's a
Mm.
dead giveaway too when they go out of the room and they come back and say the doctor would like to see you. So I
Yes.
knew right away. But
Mhm.
you had a mammogram, an ultrasound, a diagnostics, an ultrasound, and then to see the doctor, and then straight to a biopsy that
Yes.
same day. That is pretty traumatic there. Wow.
Yes. I
So
mean,
what were you, go ahead.
I know it takes people like so long to even get appointments as
Hmm.
well. So the fact that they were rushing me through, squeezing me in on, doctors' lunch breaks, etc., for this also gave me some sense of fear and alarm that this was serious and they wanted to act quickly. I think part of it too is my age. We hear so many women under 40 being diagnosed with breast cancer. It's like this is scary. This is severe and we need to take quick action. And so really quickly after all of the diagnostics, it was right into treatment and really not a lot of time to absorb what your diagnosis is and that you have cancer.
Right. I didn't even know what dense breast tissue was until probably my 40s.
Mm,
And I
mhm,
had two lumpectomies in the last 10 years that were benign. But I always, when I would have my mammogram, I would say, I needed diagnostics, I
mm,
need an ultrasound. I wanted to make sure. And there are so many women who are popping up who have been diagnosed in their 20s, or late 20s, 30s, and I have interviewed quite a few so far. And I'm just trying to, my podcast was sort of, well, it was born out of the understanding that early detection is so key. And my audience, even though, my audience, they're breast cancer survivors, but in a sense, sometimes that's sort of preaching to the choir.
mhm.
I really want to reach those people who have never been diagnosed as much as I can. And I know it's so hard if you've never been diagnosed, you're really not listening so much because it hasn't hit you yet. But
Sure.
that's really primarily, I want to reach people so that they understand that they do need to listen to their bodies and don't just blow it off and say this is normal, or it must be stress or whatever.
Right.
So what was your diagnosis, number one? What kind of cancer, breast cancer, and then what were your treatments?
Yeah, no, great question. And, I commend you too for getting the awareness out there and the prevention, right? Just knowing what dense tissue is, understanding that different states in the US have different laws and regulations around what they're required to actually tell you about your dense tissue. So there's a lot of work to be done. So I appreciate you kind of bringing people onto your show to amplify those voices and opportunities.
Well, and to collaborate with people like you,
Hmm.
I feel like this is a good relationship in blooming here.
Absolutely.
And we're all in this together, and we're all really, our aim is very similar, of course, and we have a fire in our belly to make sure that we get that message out there. So thank you too.
Absolutely. So to answer your question, I will start at the end with what my diagnosis is, but would like to share how we got to what that diagnosis was. So right now, and I say right now, I was diagnosed with triple positive breast cancer. So that's hormonal receptor positive, HER2 positive breast cancer. So That's why I say I am now. However, when we look at my treatment plan, I went through chemotherapy before surgery. And then I had surgery. I had what I call a bilateral lumpectomy, which is probably not the technical term for it, but I had a lumpectomy on one side and reconstruction on the other to make things a little bit more symmetrical. I had a full axillary node dissection where they took out all of my lymph nodes under my left arm. And then I had a month of radiation, so 30 rounds of radiation treatment to my left breast, which also had its own complications as well, because if you're radiating anything on your left side, it's so close to your heart. So I would love to dive into some of that as well.
Please.
I also so much education to share here. So I love sharing my story. And so thank you for giving me this opportunity, because I want to use it as an education opportunity, right? So when you get diagnosed with breast cancer, you could have chemotherapy. You may be a candidate for chemotherapy either before or after surgery. Typically, if you are triple negative breast cancer, meaning that you don't have, hormone receptor positive breast cancer or the HER2 expression, you would be triple negative. And they want to start you with chemotherapy first to see how your body is going to respond to those drugs before doing surgery. In other cases, they may decide to do chemotherapy first to decrease the size of your tumor, to make sure that you could potentially become a candidate for a lumpectomy, et cetera. So there's a lot of reasons why someone might have chemotherapy first. So I think depending on who you're talking to, you might hear, oh, I had surgery followed by chemo, but I also share it can be the other way around. What we're noticing when we're sharing our stories is that, yes, breast cancer unites us all, but all of us have very unique experiences. And so I was on a variety of chemotherapy drugs. Adriamycin, Cytoxan, and Taxol was my first regimen. And then I had a little bit, I guess it was like the gray area of this HER2 expression. Now, in 2024, even in 2023, there were big news coming out about what HER2 low could be. But at the time, we didn't have a lot of information on all of the subsets of the HER2 gene expression. Excuse me. But my doctor thought, there's a little bit of expression here, so let's treat it as if it were HER2 positive. And he gave me a drug called Herceptin, and we paired that with another drug called Perjeta. So in the first 6 months of my diagnosis, I was on 5 different chemotherapies and immunotherapy drugs. So my body was absorbing all of this toxicity. I lost my hair. What I start laughing about is like, everyone knows that you're gonna lose hair on the top of your head, but like, do you know that you also lose like your nose hairs? And so you constantly have this runny nose.
Yes.
And then, right? And then like you lose your eyelashes. So like all these dust particles were like coming into my eyes. And I was like, oh my God, even babies are born with eyelashes. Like I need my eyelashes. Do not underestimate your eyelashes, right? And then by the time I lost my eyebrows, I just looked like an alien. So, that's a good picture right there. Fast forward to the surgery. Had a successful surgery, in the sense that there are no complications. But afterwards, when they took out the whole tumor and doing further tests on the pathology, we realized that I did not have a complete response to the 5 chemotherapy drugs that I was on. So that was a little bit of a setback and slightly devastating, because while they removed the tumor from my lymph nodes and from my breast tissue, there were still what they call residual disease floating around. And residual disease are those things that, you can't really see on a microscope, but like, they particles that kind of just like broke off. So I was given an oral chemotherapy called Xeloda, and I was on Xeloda for 6 months afterwards to what I call is just like extra credit, like make sure we're really killing all of the cancer cells that could have been floating around out there. So I really feel like I've been through so much treatment that I could relate to a lot of people in terms of what their diagnosis were and the treatments that they were on. My staging was 2B, so still considered early stage. It, I think, gets the letter B because of the involvement in the lymph nodes. And because I am hormonal positive, I am also on hormonal therapies to suppress the estrogen in my body. So I was on letrozole, which is an aromatase inhibitor, for 5 years, and I met my 5-year mark, and then they moved me on to tamoxifen, which I'll be on for another 5 years. So ultimately having 10 years of hormonal therapy.
Interesting. Mine was it was HER2 positive, estrogen and progesterone negative,
Oh, okay.
and I did have 2 different chemos. 5 of that was my dog. 5 of the 6 treatments I had to stop because of a very rare anemia I developed, which is a totally different story. But it came out of it was discovered during the cancer. And then I had also the Herceptin and Perjeta
Mm-hmm.
for the remainder of the year. But I do remember having some people would say, well, why don't they just get in there and cut that sucker out of there right now? And come to find out that's just not how it works with all cancers. So
Right.
it's just very, very complex of, what your treatment's going to be according to the kind of cancer you have. So yeah,
Exactly. And what stage
interesting.
were you?
I was 2, and so I must have been 2A. So I
Okay.
didn't understand that at first either, because I was told that in order for it to be if it got to your lymph node, I was told that it was more stage 3. So
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a difference between 2A and 2B, but it had not made it to my lymph nodes, but I didn't know that until after my mastectomy and reconstruction. They took
Sure.
3 lymph nodes from they had gone in there and they did an ultrasound, and there was no inflammation and really no indication that it had made it to the lymph node before I even had surgery. So,
Right.
but they did pull the lymph nodes, a few from my left side and one from my right side, just to double check.
Right. Right.
Yeah. But and then we just go into, prevention of lymphedema. And so that's a whole nother ball of wax that you have to learn about.
Absolutely.
What is your survivorship like? First of all, you have survivingbreastcancer.org, and that is a huge part of your survivorship.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us how that was born and what, how that's evolved, I guess,
Yeah.
over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So my parents came to visit me when I was going through surgery. They're out of state, they're not in Boston, but they came to Boston to support me. And real estate in Boston is small, so like I couldn't host them at my condo. So they ended up getting an Airbnb down the street. Excuse me. And I just remember like the nights before, like, while I'm recovering, and everything, they were there. And we're just sitting in the living room of this Airbnb, and I'm like, now what? Like, do I just go back to work? I was on FMLA. I had time to really reflect and heal, not just physically, but I think that's really when like the emotional trauma was hitting you, because when you're going through chemotherapy or the month of radiation, you're just like, okay, go go go. But then when the treatment kind of stops, you're like, oh, I just went through something like quite severe. I had like to even say the word cancer out loud like took a lot of time to like roll off the tongue, if you will. Even trying to tell people that like I have cancer, like I couldn't say the word, like I would just start crying. um and really reflecting, just like, and it doesn't have to be cancer, but just like any sort of life experience, right? When you're like, okay, really, what is the purpose of my life? What am I meant to be doing?
Mm-hmm.
What is impactful, and what else is out there? So during the 12 weeks that I was on FMLA, I'm definitely a workaholic by nature, and so it was not easy for me to like not work. Um, but even after my surgeries, I would like take walks around the neighborhood. Um, After like the radiation cycles, like I would just try and share my experience through like YouTube videos, and kind of vlogging about my cancer experience, if you will. Everyone was asking, friends and family were like, "Are you going to start a blog? Because we want to keep updated on your status and how you're doing, but we don't want to bombard you with emails and phone calls," which I appreciate, because then you're just telling the same story over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
And at the time, I knew I wouldn't have the energy to write prolifically the way I would want to, but I can pick up my iPhone and do like a selfie video, very amateur, and then post that on a YouTube video like site for friends and family to watch. And what I did not realize was through doing those videos, people started to follow me, like not just friends and family, but like people were really interested in what I was going through, seeing what it was like to go through, my first infusion, losing my hair or cutting off my hair first and then losing my hair. The night before my surgery, what was going through my head. I was just recording all of these like very personal vlogs on YouTube. And I was not trying to like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like sharing my information out there. And I remember one time, and I have this really terrible port scar. Where's my port scar? Right
Mhm.
here. Like it never healed really well, but oh yeah, do you have one too? It never healed really well, but it got infected. But I remember doing this video and I was like, oh yeah, I got my port placed today. And they said it was going to be a little red. And as you can see, it's red, but I think it's healing just fine. And someone on YouTube put in the comments, like, no, girl, that's infected. You better contact your doctor. And I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. Like, thank you for telling me that. So yes, it was infected. I had to get it removed and cleaned and like a whole bunch of drama, other story. But this is like the long-winded way of just saying, like, I just started producing content. And then when I was talking to my parents in this Airbnb, I was like, what do I do next? Like, what's the next phase? And we're like, why don't we start a nonprofit? Like, what if there's like this community that we could build, this community that I wish I had when I was going through my diagnosis, and creating a place for people to get information in layman's terms, in relatable terms, nothing over I don't know, edited or, mastermind or anything, just like the real and the raw, was really how it started. So we kind of looked around the room. We're like, do you all want to be on my board to start? And went through all the paperwork to go figure out how to form a 501c3. And survivingbreastcancer.org was born.
Well, lucky us out there. I actually just applied for, somebody told me I needed to do a nonprofit, but I don't have nearly what you have going on. I'm always looking at, websites and resources like yours, which is amazing. My biggest thing is that I need help paying for running a podcast. As you know, you have to pay for
Mm-hmm.
all the, platforms and things like that. And it takes a lot of work. But somebody had suggested that I do that because eventually I do want to be able to have other stories, and I do want to be able to house resources like,
Mm-hmm.
survivingbreastcancer.org in there so that people know where to go. That's my ultimate goal, is to sort of take all of the resources that I have found very, very helpful, again, such as yours,
Thank
and
you.
housing it on my website. And, so that there's more exposure for you, and, people can learn just so much from that website itself. And I want stories, and I want people to be able to see pictures of me, as
Mm-hmm.
you did. I had a private Facebook group that I had a lot of people following, and they still are.
Right.
But I videoed all kinds of things. I went live and helped people understand what was going on throughout the whole entire journey, again, because I didn't really want to repeat it a million times.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if you want to hear what's going on, come over there, or Caring Bridge, because,
Yes.
but thank goodness for that person on YouTube who commented about your
I
port.
know. I know. Definitely a
Yeah.
lifesaver though.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's like, the purpose of it was sort of twofold there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what is, and I do want to say, it's so interesting because whenever I talk to survivors, there's so many parallels to stories, in that, for me, my podcast was born a year, the idea was born a year ago, literally,
Okay.
because I was cancer-free December 13, 2022. And I had my surgery, and then I had my thoracic surgery to get this big thymoma tumor out. It was like 5 weeks
Oh.
later. And come February, I was noticing that my life was just sort of, what am I doing? Because I had
Mm-hmm.
just retired
Okay.
when I got breast cancer. I retired, and 1 week later I had breast cancer. So my first year of retirement was absolutely so different than what I had expected. And by the time I was cancer free, my husband had already been retired for a year and a half. And I felt like I didn't have any significance because, like you, I was a total workaholic. I had a million things going on before breast cancer. And so
Mm-hmm.
to retire and to have all these ideas in mind of what I could do, like, travel and all these things, and then have breast cancer and live it completely different. When February came around, I felt like I had zero significance, no purpose. And I was like, what the heck am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
And that really truly is. I knew that I wanted to educate breast cancer patients and people who have never been diagnosed. And that's where Test Those Breasts was born. And my husband gave it the name because when it all comes down to it, early detection's where it's at, right?
Yeah.
And so I launched it literally on my 1-year anniversary of the diagnosis.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. And I'm sure like your survivingbreastcancer.org organization is probably a huge healing mechanism for you as well. Because we talk about it. It's so therapeutic, but then you also get to make great friends that you never thought that you would ever even have, people that you've never even met in person. And it's a real silver lining right there.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's
Yeah.
definitely therapeutic. Even playing around with like my website, I'm constantly changing like the homepage or like playing around with the fonts. And William, my husband, says like, this is your therapy. Like, you're going on there, you're connecting, you're helping people. And I think there's just no better gift. Maybe it just comes with like wisdom and age. I don't know. But like to be able to help people is just so motivating. And
Yeah. And I like how your husband recognizes that. Were you both married at the time?
no, but
Or
we
was
were
that
dating at the time.
okay? So how was he as a caregiver?
Oh, he was phenomenal. He was
Good.
phenomenal. The doctor would be asking me
Yeah.
on a bed. And then
Let's be
William
real.
was, yeah, I know, right? And like all I'm thinking is like, I want to get out of here. Like, I'm fine. Yeah, there's nausea, but like, what can we do? But William was like, all right, doctor, let me tell you how she really is. Because he was with me at home. He saw how miserable I was and how the side effects were really impacting my quality of life. And so he was just such a supporter and huge advocate and loved me no matter what, with or without breasts or anything that we were going through. Obviously, it's not something he signed up for when he started dating me. But we've been together for a very long time, and he came with me through cancer, and we actually just got married August of 23. So we're still kind of in the newlywed phase.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
congratulations. That's
thank
pretty
you.
amazing. I was going to say, because I told my husband when I got the cancer, I was so upset and so angry and all the things, like all the things. And I
Yeah.
literally told him, I said, you didn't sign up for this.
Oh.
And then I realized, oh, yes, you did, because through sickness and in health, right? But your boyfriend and then to husband, like
Yes.
he went all through that with you and still married you, and that shows the profound love that he has for you. Oh, that just makes me
Oh,
cry.
thank you.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I'm just super teary-eyed right
Yeah.
now. That
I
just gave
know.
me good goosebumps.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it too is to show and let people know like life continues. You can still have relationships. You can still
Yeah.
get married. There's, that was part of it too.
Oh, I just love it. I'm so happy for you.
Thank
Well,
you.
in your website, in your survivingbreastcancer.org, what are some of the most amazing things that you think are in there that you just want people to see?
Oh gosh, we do a lot. And it always like hits me when I'm doing our like end of year impact report or talking to people about what we do. So if you hop on over to survivingbreastcancer.org, I hope you don't feel too overwhelmed. But a couple things that I can share. Our goal really is to provide education, community, and support. Like those are the three pillars that we are founded on. And my background is in education. I actually still work in education as my day job. And,
Same. I just want to let you know. Same.
yes, all the similarities. I love it. Yeah. And then, just doing the podcast or doing the nonprofit work is, a labor of love. So we support those diagnosed with breast cancer and their caregivers through all stages of breast cancer and all subtypes of breast cancer. So whether you're stage 0 or early stage, like 1, 2, or 3, or living with metastatic disease, we have programs and services to support you regardless of those stages. I share that because there's a lot of great organizations out there that are laser focused on a particular subset. So if you're, excuse me, if you're living with like metastatic disease, for example, a great organization is called Project Life, for example, and they work specifically with people who are living with terminal breast cancer. So there's just like different needs. So I share this with surviving breast cancer isn't like the surviving phase, right? It's not like the past tense or the future tense. It's like, this is what we're doing now in the present. We're surviving our diagnosis. And so we want to be encompassing to all stages and subtypes. We offer a variety of programming that is absolutely free to anyone who signs up, ranging from expressive writing classes to art therapy classes. We have like open mic poetry nights. We do support groups. We have yoga classes. We have one of our newest programs. It's an 8-week program called Encourage and Empower. So if you've been diagnosed with breast cancer and you're in your first year of that diagnosis, we have a program for you where you'll kind of be placed in a cohort with other people diagnosed at that same time frame, because you guys are probably going through the same types of decision making and treatment plans. So we want to build that cohort and camaraderie. We provide and produce a lot of content. So Jamie, as you know, you're always getting emails from us, from our weekly Monday newsletters to blogs that we produce to our podcast that we produce, Breast Cancer Conversations. We host webinar series, bring in the experts to talk about, the hot topics that you, our community members, are asking us. And so I really just say, like, you guys are the experts, and leverage us as a nonprofit, and we'll go out and fundraise and then build the programs and services that you guys are requesting. So
Yeah. Brilliant. I love that you have the cohort, because, if people know about that and they are able to go through this journey, or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
Together, and making decisions together, and being able to bounce things off of each other, because the people on the outside, like your friends and all those people, they can be there to support you, but not in the way that a cohort like that can support, and people like you who are running them, and coaches or whoever's out there to help people get through it. I think that's super brilliant. So do you find that do you find it pretty easy for people out there in our community, and at large anyway, are really eager to support organizations like yours?
Support in what sense? Like get involved, or
get involved, donate, whatever, however, just to make sure, because they're so invested. I know that there are some people who are just so interested in making sure that nonprofits are, supported, because of the amazing content that you have.
Thank you. Yeah. I didn't grow up wanting to start a nonprofit or be an executive director of a nonprofit. That was not in the cards or the dream. So I don't come to this with like the know-how that, someone who would go to school to like start their own business per se. I don't have a formal business education background or fundraising background. So a lot of this is like trial by error and learning. I do say, yes, there's absolutely community out there who want to support the work that we're doing. And it's not necessarily always in dollars. It could just be donating one's time to like help support our programs. As a nonprofit, we rely heavily on our volunteers to make us thrive. And so there's always plenty of work to do. One of the phrases I tell anyone who's joining us, and even students who are looking for like internships or capstone projects, we work with a variety of people to help, get the day-to-day done. But I say cancer is stressful enough. And so if you join the team, like, we're stress-free. Like, what we do on the day-to-day should not be stressful, because cancer is stressful enough. And the moment that it is, and I tell myself this, and I tell William this, because we talk about breast cancer all the time, because we live together, we're husband and wife, we run the organization. So literally breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and even in the middle of the night, I'm like, hey, I got an idea. Like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, we're constantly talking about it. But the moment it becomes like non-fun, like the moment that we start stressing about finances, or, how we're going to pay the contractors, or what about this, or even some of the FOMO, right? Of like, oh, look how great that organization is doing. Like, why can't we be like them? Like, it is so like all the same things that happen like on an individual level can happen at the company level as well, right? And so I just want to say, like, we're not there to reinvent the wheel. We want to support and provide the support and resources that we offer without stepping on other organizations' toes. And we love what we do.
Well, and I like your mission. That is, and your philosophy on how it should be as you are working it. Because, yeah, sometimes just podcasting sometimes can be stressful. And I always told myself the minute it becomes too stressful, I mean, I was a teacher for middle and high school for
Oh,
20 years, and that's very stressful. And when I retired, I wanted to just do things on, hey, I just got an email from you.
oh, I love that automation.
I just looked down and I was like, hey, I see that. I love that automation too. Okay, so can we talk a little bit as we wrap up about your podcast, Breast Cancer Conversations? How long have you
For
been doing
sure.
that? And what's that like for you?
Yes. Oh, it's a lot of work. I'm not going to lie. I'm sure you know, running a
Oh, yeah.
podcast. So I started the podcast in 2018, just as another modality to get information out to people, right? So they can come to our website and read a blog and get information about breast cancer, and they can just be an IP address. Like, I never know that they're there. They could get support and information by attending our webinars or attending one of our support groups. So, like, virtual, in person, if you will, engagement. And so then it just made natural sense. If they wanted to like watch something, they have my YouTube channel. But if they wanted to hear something, like there was a void. So it just made natural sense to want to go and produce a podcast so that people who wanted to absorb content through listening, they had that modality as well. So really just trying to provide the education in a variety of formats, so that people can get the information they need when they need it.
Yeah. And the nice thing about a podcast is that people don't really, I mean, my first two episodes tell who I am and what my diagnosis was, who I was before breast cancer, so my audience can understand that part of it. But then I sprinkle my story in other,
Yes.
as we're talking. But the nice thing is that people can go to your podcast and you can kind of flip through and say, oh, this is about reconstruction, or this is about, chemotherapy or whatever. And they can just sort of listen to that one.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not linear, in other words. And so you don't have to
Yes.
it's not like a book. You start at the very beginning and then you have to go to the very end, because it can get a little overwhelming for people, especially when you release weekly, which is what I do as well. So,
Yes.
yeah, I think that I really, really love the podcasting. It's my favorite. It's my favorite to talk to people like you and get to know other people's stories. And it is a lot of work, but I
Mm-hmm.
love it so much and
Yes.
I don't want to stop. So, well,
Awesome.
I think it's great that you have all of those things. You obviously work really hard. I want to let you know that I do have a YouTube channel that I finally started.
Oh,
So I
great.
actually do upload, it releases to YouTube and it has my logo on there, but I also upload the video. Is that
Oh, this
okay with
video?
you? Yep.
Oh, I should have asked. Okay, because I prefaced all of this. So your listeners know I have a cold, so I'm
You
not
have a
looking
goal.
my best or sounding my best, but absolutely, I am all about being raw and authentic. So please feel free to share.
Okay. Well, I mean, to me, you look great. I would never have known that you actually have a cold. So you look really good. I don't know what you look like when you think you look good, because you look good now.
You're very kind. Thank you. It's like
um,
when you know you're not feeling your best, but
yeah. And I also, I will edit out, any kind of coughs or anything like that.
oh,
But
no, we're good. Thank you.
I'm much like you in that. So we're all human beings, right? And we're having a conversation, whether whether I have a UTI, just
Mm,
FYI, I have a
yeah,
UTI. And so I'm not feeling
yeah.
all that great either. I
Oh,
tell the good, the bad, the ugly, and I've probably looked, I don't know, a lot
yeah,
better or whatever on mine. So, but yeah, I do, just because sometimes people like to see who's talking.
absolutely.
But I just really appreciate your being here. I do have in the show notes all the ways that people can get a hold of you on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And is it called Twitter anymore? Is
I
that
still call it Twitter.
you do? I
Yeah.
mean, I haven't been on
X
there in so long.
X doesn't resonate.
X? No,
Yeah.
it's really kind of
Mm.
strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like
And then also your website, survivingbreastcancer.org. You also have your podcast link on there, your blog. and events, which is really
Yes.
nice. So people can just click right on there. Okay. Well, I just really
Fantastic.
appreciate your being here, even though you're not feeling so great. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with?
No, this has been a lot of fun, Jamie. I'm so honored that we can connect this way, that I can be a guest on your show, that we can share each other's stories, and just continue to support each other in the great work we're doing.
I love it. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate it. And I hope you feel better. And to my audience, thank you so much for joining us again on this episode of Test Those Breasts. And we will see you next time. Bye for now.